Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here today, and I know we've been kind of going on. I'm trying not to rehash anything that's already been discussed, but Commissioner Traynor, is the Manhattan District Attorney's Office charged with determining whether someone violated the Federal Elections Campaign Act, or FECA?
No, Congressman. That is exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal Election Commission and ultimately could be referred to the Department of Justice if it's found to be criminal.
So certainly not the New York Supreme Court either, state Supreme Court?
Absolutely not.
No. So as you said, it's Federal Elections Commission. Was President Trump's alleged payment via Michael Cohen to Stephanie Clifford referred to the FEC?
We did have several complaints related to it.
And what did the FEC decide with respect to that referral?
Well, ultimately, we deadlocked on a decision related to it, but the real factor in making the determination was the fact that the Department of Justice asked us to abate those proceedings so that they could conduct an over a year-long criminal investigation, which they determined there was no criminality in, and then they sent it back to us, and it was statute of limitations barred.
So did the Justice Department also decline to charge the former president for charges related to FECA?
They did.
Right. And so the two agencies that are charged by Congress to determine whether President Trump's payment constituted a violation of FECA found no violation and took no enforcement action. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Foley, you argued in a recent Wall Street Journal op-ed that Judge Merchant likely denied President Trump a meaningful opportunity to be heard by denying the testimony of former FEC Chairman Brad Smith. Can you please elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of sort of misreporting on what happened here. Yes, Judge Merchan, as my colleague Mr. Eisen points out, did allow Brad Smith to testify, but the catch was he could not opine at all, either provide his opinion or any personal opinion or legal opinion regarding whether or not President Trump's actions had violated FECA, which was basically, then he was useless, which is why President Trump didn't call him as a witness. So the whole point was President Trump wanted an expert witness to put before the jury to show the jury that what he had done did not, in fact, violate federal election law. And he was denied that opportunity, and that seems like a rather basic thing that he would have the opportunity to be heard on.
Do you think there was a chance that he could have had success upon appeal?
Will he have success on appeal of this? Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, the thing is that, you know, again, I agree with Norm on the fact that the bias issues are difficult to win because they get deferential standards of review. But the due process issue is a question of law. It gets de novo review. The appellate courts get to look at it fresh, with fresh eyes, no deference whatsoever. And more importantly, due process issues are issues that the Supreme Court can ultimately grant cert and hear.
Right. So Judge Merchan also ruled that Michael Cohen's guilty plea for violating FECA was inadmissible at trial. Why do you think he made that ruling? I think we know, but...
Well, because you can't basically taint one individual by the guilty conduct of another.
Judge Merchan also ruled that D.A. Bragg could elicit testimony from Mr. Cohen about his guilty plea to impeach his credibility as a witness. D.A. Bragg then repeatedly made reference at trial in his office closing arguments to the jury about Cohen's FECA guilty plea. Did repeatedly subjecting the jury to this testimony essentially get around the judge's own ruling that Cohen's FECA guilty plea was inadmissible as substantive evidence?
Yeah, I mean, that should have been reined in. That was clearly trying to, you know, taint one person through association with another who was guilty. They also did the same thing, I believe, with the CFO of Trump Organization. They made similar comments because he also entered a guilty plea. Weisselberg. Yeah.
Thank you. I yield back.
Will the gentleman yield? Will the gentleman yield? I do. Thank you. So I just want to get this straight. The campaign finance expert wasn't allowed to testify about campaign finance.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the way Judge Merchan tried to explain it is he said, well, you know, I'm the expert of the law. And, okay, granted, that's why the judge is there. But Brad
Smith wasn't allowed to talk about the very testimony we just got from Commissioner Trainer, in essence. right?
Precisely.
Well, we're going to give Brad Smith a chance to testify in front of this committee as well. And we're going to let him tell the Congress and the country what he wasn't allowed to tell the court and the jury, because we think that's important. And the gentleman from Wisconsin was right on target when he was asking that question.
To investigate, because they sent it back to us and we were barred by the statute of limitations from even investigating the normal civil things that we would look at with regard to those type of expenditures.
But your point here is they've said idly by and allowed a state officer to assert federal jurisdiction where they themselves had intervened, to use the word, and taken jurisdiction from you and concluded there was nothing there regarding a federal statute, right?
That is
a, quote, federal crime that they come up with somewhere.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know what role Mr. Coangelo played in that investigation that took place when they took it away from the Federal Election Commission, did that investigation, and then he later left the office to go prosecute this at the state level.
Well, we're going to find that out on July 12th when Mr. Colangelo will be sitting in your seat, Mr. Bragg will be sitting in Ms. Foley's seat, and we'll get a chance to ask him. Ms. Foley, Mrs. Foley, excuse me, the Democrats talk about, jury of his peers. Okay, fine, that's how our system works. But if President Trump didn't learn what the unspecified crime was until the jury got the instructions from the judge, that sort of changes the dynamic a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not blaming the jury. I mean,
of course.
The jury, has to operate according to the instructions provided by the judge. The poison here, the poison pill, are the jury instructions themselves, which provided the notice, but it came too late for purposes of due process. So yeah, I mean, you can't correct that through a bad set of jury instructions. If there's a due process defect because he learned too late, you have to redo the trial. You have to reverse the conviction, and then the prosecutor has to decide if they want to. Yeah.
I was an economics major. I majored focused on wrestling, but you had to get a degree. I got one in economics, and they talk about this opportunity cost. If you don't know what the issue is, you miss the opportunity to maybe focus in on the issue as the defense counsel, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of important, particularly when you're talking about what kind of sentence they may try to impose on the president on July 11th. That's kind of important, right?
It's kind of important, and I would suggest that any member of this committee who faced similarly amorphous charges or a loved one would be absolutely incensed by facing these kinds of charges, where it was a moving target.
You're not the only constitutional scholar who's raised this concern, this, I think, huge concern. Mr. Dershowitz, Mr. Turley, other esteemed constitutional scholars have said the same thing.
I'm in good company. I think there's a general consensus that there are some due process problems here.
You sure are. Mr. Attorney General, July 15, 2021, Alvin Bragg. I'm the candidate in the race who has the experience with Donald Trump, and I think it'd be hard to argue with the fact that that'd be the most important, most high-profile case, and I've seen him up front and seen the lawlessness that he could do. That's what he said as a candidate. Does that fit with kind of the ethics of someone who's a member of the bar and running for a district attorney's position? Is that how you're supposed to conduct yourself in a campaign?
Absolutely not. That abhorrent statement is an incurable impropriety that should have disqualified. Chairman of the full committee for 5 minutes.
To reduce emissions, do you have to reduce production, Mr. Benvenu?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
To reduce emissions, do you have to reduce production? You guys said Climate Action 100, you're all part of this group. You said your goal is to reduce carbon emissions, and you got this focus list, 170 companies that you're targeting to change how they do things. And you said of that 170, 1/4 of them are oil and gas companies. 42 are oil and gas companies. And what I want to know is, in order to reduce carbon emissions, do those 42 companies, oil and gas companies, on the target list, on the focus list, do they have to reduce production?
I don't think anybody knows how the climate transition is going to take place.
That's not what I ask you. Do they have to reduce production or not? They're in the business of making oil and gas, producing oil and gas. And I'm asking you, do they have to stop or lower, decrease oil and gas production?
As I say, I don't think anybody knows how the climate transition...
Ms. Lamb, what do you think?
I think that the oil and gas industry is facing enormous headwinds because of global emissions going up so much. And so I think that those companies are challenged and are going to have...
I didn't ask if they were challenged. I didn't ask about headwinds. I asked a simple question. Do you think they have to reduce production of oil and gas?
I think each company needs to take a look at their business model and figure out how
you don't think
they're
that
going to adapt.
they can increase production? You're okay with that?
I think that each oil and gas
If a
company
company
needs to take a
making
look.
their product wants to make more of the product, are you okay with that?
I think that the product of oil and gas companies is energy, and they can look and see how they can best produce energy for their
So
customers.
what do you mean? When you got 42 oil and gas companies on your focus list and you want to reduce carbon emissions, are oil and gas companies going to be allowed to encourage, engage, whatever term you want to use? Are they going to be able to make more oil and gas or less oil and gas? What do you think they should do?
Oil and gas companies can do whatever they want because
Well, then why are they on your focus list? What are you trying to get them to do?
as investors that consider the financial risks
Ms.
of
Luber, will you
climate-
answer the question? Because the other two folks won't. Do you think
Yes.
oil and gas companies should be able to make more oil and gas, or do they have to make less?
They don't necessarily have to make less. Let me give you
So
an
do you guys all
example.
disagree with Mr. Khanna?
No, no.
I played Mr. Khanna's clip. Congressman Ro Khanna said to the CEO of Chevron, are you embarrassed? I'll read it. Are you embarrassed that an American company, that as an American company, your production's going up? Should they be embarrassed because they're producing more? Should an oil and gas company be embarrassed because they're producing more oil and gas?
So oil and gas companies should limit their greenhouse gas emissions. That doesn't immediately mean they produce less. Oil and gas
Oh,
companies...
so it means later they produce less?
No, what it means is they
Are you disagreeing? Here's a question. Are you disagreeing with Mr. Congressman Khanna, or are you agreeing with him?
Please repeat what he said.
He said to the CEO of Chevron, are you embarrassed as an American company that you're producing, that your production's going up?
Yeah, I don't know.
Obviously wanting the production to go down.
Context. I do know
That's the
that oil and
context.
gas-
He went through all of them. All of them said, will you pledge to reduce production? I'm just asking you guys, as the guys who have 42 oil and gas companies on your target list, is it okay for oil and gas companies to actually increase oil and gas production?
If they could decrease their emissions in the process, I think they would be looked at differently. Regardless, so many of the oil and gas companies have decreased their methane emissions.
Anybody recently leave Climate Action 100? Any of your investment members, your member investors, anyone recently leave Climate Action 100?
About a dozen.
About a dozen? Can you
Yep.
name some of those companies?
Sure.
Small companies, big investors, small investors, who were they?
Some combination, but I would argue more, and there were some household names. I would also
Some big ones, weren't there?
Yep, BlackRock.
BlackRock's pretty big.
JP Morgan.
JP Morgan, that's pretty big.
In all of those
Vanguard.
cases, Vanguard, they've said they're going
State
to
Street.
continue fighting for climate risk
PIMCO,
reduction.
right? They're some of the biggest investor and asset managers in the world. They all left your group. Why'd they leave?
Well, they all have different reasons. BlackRock has only
They all left at
partially.
sort of the same time. There must be something going on here.
They've heard a lot, they've got a lot of pressure from Congress and others that they should leave. BlackRock said to us, we're going to
We're not
continue
pressuring
work.
anybody. We just want to know what you guys are up to. 42 oil and gas companies on your focus list, and you can't even tell me if you want production of oil and gas to go up or down for them.
No, what I have said was that some of them have increased production but reduced emissions. The greenhouse gas emissions that
Are you for ending the internal combustion engine in the next 10 years?
that is the direction that our government is going, and I think it's the direction that the automakers have
You agree with
determined
that?
makes sense.
Getting rid of
yes.
the internal combustion engine in 10 years.
Yes.
Are you for reducing airline flight travel by 12%?
I don't know the numbers for airline flights.
Do you want it to go down?
Not necessarily. I don't think.
What about
Okay.
the last question is, what about hamburgers? Where do you stand on hamburgers? Is 1.5 a week enough, or do we get more? Chairman Massey wants to know. He's got some of the best grass-fed beef I've ever had.
Freedom of diet.
What's that?
I said people should have freedom of diet.
Oh, so you don't agree with that?
Well, in all cases, there are other ways to fix the challenges.
Newsflash, Ceres is okay with us eating more hamburger, Chairman.
Eat what you would
Newsflash,
like.
Ceres is okay with that.
Eat what you would like.
I yield back.
Thank you. I recognize the gentleman from California.